The Mecklenburg County election debates are a service of WTVI, Mecklenburg County, and the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The views and opinions expressed in these debates are those of the candidates and do not necessarily represent the views of WTVI, its management, Mecklenburg County, or the League of Women Voters.
PBS Charlotte and the League of Women Voters present Election Debate 2016.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with PBS Charlotte, and welcome to the 2016 General Election Debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. During the next 20 minutes, you'll hear from the two candidates in the Congressional District 12 race. Questions for today's debate were provided by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The candidates were not given the questions in advance. I'll call on the candidates in random order, and you'll have either 30 seconds or a minute to respond. And if you would like to challenge an opponent, you simply raise your yellow challenge card, and you will have 3 opportunities to do so during this debate. There will be no opening statements, but each candidate will be allowed to make a 30-second closing statement. And now let's meet the candidates for Congressional District 12, and we begin with Alma Adams, who is a Democrat, and Leon Threatt, who is the Republican candidate. We're glad to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first question today is, what are your views on the police shooting of Keith Lamont Scott and the protests in Charlotte that followed? And we begin with Ms. Adams.
Thank you for your question. I thought that it was a very tragic occasion here in Charlotte. We really need to have our community to come together. I did fly in from Washington to meet with some of the ministers as well as members of the community to talk about it. I think we've had tragic situations with so many African American men being killed. I understand police were hurt. I think that we need to make sure that everybody's safe, that our police are safe, that our community is safe, and I think we need to, we've started some discussions around how we can bring harmony and peace to our community, and I certainly am working hard to make sure that that happens. In the meantime, I think the City Council has put some things in place as to what they want to do to bring all of the parties to the table. That's what we need to do until we begin to, first of all, realize that and that there is a problem. I don't think we'll be able to work on it.
All right, thank you. Again, the question is, what are your views on the police shooting of Keith Lamont Scott and the protest in Charlotte that followed? And we are looking for a 1-minute response.
Well, it was certainly a very tragic situation to watch anyone being shot and killed in our great city. Equally so was the tragedy of Mr. Carr being killed as part of the protest issues. You know, as I heard about the shooting and I arrived in Charlotte on that Thursday, and I, along with a number of other clergy, came to the scene, came to that location, and spent the next several days just there every evening addressing the public and addressing those protesters. I was quite encouraged by the police, their response, their patience with the public as we walked with them and talked and intervened with the many of the protesters. I was quite encouraged by Chief Putney's leadership in that and how he maintained a good decor and respect for the public. So tragic, but I was encouraged by many of the results that followed thereafter.
All right, thank you. Our second question, are there ways our national government can impact the tension between the police and members of local communities? We're looking for a 1-minute response, and we go back to you, Mr. Threatt.
Well, I think community policing is an excellent example of what needs to continue in our nation. I was privileged to be one of the first Charlotte-Mecklenburg police in community policing, and we saw the impact. We saw the results of building strong relationships. And so even from a national level, we need to continue to promote and incentivize good community policing and find the funding that will support and uplift those relationships. It is those kind of relationships prior to a difficulty that gives police and communities a common ground to work well together. We saw this in the early 90s when we had the Rodney King riots in other parts of the nation. Here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, because we had strong, good community policing, we have very little challenges and very little problems. So strong community policing from a national level and at a state level, I think is very important.
All right, thank you. Again, the question, are there ways our national government can impact the tension between the police and members of local communities? Ms. Adams.
Thank you for your question. I do believe that the federal government does have a role we need to make sure that we provide the funding for our communities to address this problem. Now, I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and of course we went to speak with Attorney General Lynch to get involved in this process. I think we do have to make sure that police are properly trained, that we need to focus on de-escalation and how we can avoid situations of conflict. But I think if we can provide the funding, the City Council has made reference to things that they need, and I think that we should be very respectful of the desires of the community and provide the funding that's necessary and the support. We also sent in supporters from the department, from the Attorney General's department, to provide counseling and the just general support to our community. We need to continue to do that.
Okay.
Jeff?
We have a challenge coming from Mr. Threatt.
I was very concerned when I heard that the Congressional Black Caucus and Congresswoman Adams had asked for the Attorney General to investigate our Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I had the great honor of working with Chief Putney along in a number of other fine police officers, and I have the utmost respect and regard for our police department. I believe that they handle the matter very well, and we have a long history here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg of working with the public, and to ask the Department of Justice to investigate our department prematurely before the investigation was complete, I thought it was a quick overreach and a response. It's that kind of premature judgments that perhaps can separate the public and separate law enforcement, which we need to come together and work well together. And to kind of seek the Department of Justice on this department prematurely, I felt that it was a little
All right, I got to cut you off
judgment.
there. Thank you, Mr. Threatt. We also have a challenge from Ms. Adams.
Let me just say that the Congressional Black Caucus has been looking at issues across this country. So what happened in Charlotte is really not unique. But I've had the privilege of working with the chief. I think he's done a good job of working with the community. We had a public meeting together. But when I came into Charlotte on that Wednesday evening and I met with the ministers and community leaders, this is what they asked me to take back to Washington, to have the Attorney General step in. And I don't think that's premature when we look at all of the other things that are going on across the country. The City Council has recently indicated that they're going to have an outside review. So I don't think that really hurts anything. I think it brings more transparency to the process, which is really what the people want. So I went as their spokesperson to deliver the message, and I think it is something that we do need to do. And I think the City Council members are receptive to making sure that we take a thorough look and that transparency and justice is what we'll get out of this process.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you a follow-up question to that question. Should police be required to turn on their cameras when responding to an incident? And we want to go back to Mr. Threatt.
I think that's common sense. I think that's transparency. I think it's reasonable. You know, our law enforcement community has a tremendous task, and it's also for their good to have a way to validate and verify their actions. So I think that's reasonable. I would think that's a respectable and appropriate response to law enforcement.
All right, Ms. Adams?
I believe, yes, they should, absolutely. As soon as they're called into a situation approaching that incident or prior to, they should turn those cameras on. I mean, that's why we've made the investment in the cameras. We do want to make sure that not only are the police protected, but that the citizens are protected. That's the only way we're going to know, the citizens will know, and the police will know exactly what happened and when it happened and how it happened.
All right, our next question. The 2013 U.S. Supreme Court negated the federal pre-clearance section of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Do you support the proposed Voting Rights Advancement Act that addresses the voting discrimination provisions that many cities and states, including North Carolina, enacted after the decision? And we're looking for a yes or no response and then a 30-second explanation.
No, I don't believe that we should have made that adjustment to allow states like North Carolina to put in place very egregious laws that would prohibit our citizens and certainly discourage them from voting. I think that when they adjusted that, it allowed states like North Carolina to come in and pass what we called, what the General Assembly called the Viva Law, which really created problems for our citizens. And we need to be really working on making sure that people vote, that we encourage folks to vote and not put laws in place that would not allow that to happen.
All right, thank you. Again, the question is, the 2013 U.S. Supreme Court negated the federal pre-clearance section of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Do you support the proposed Voting Rights Advancement Act that addresses the voting discrimination provisions that many cities and states, including North Carolina, enacted after the decision? Yes or no? A 30-second response to you, Mr. Threatt.
No, I don't support that. But I also believe that it's very important to recognize that the Voting Rights Act makes it very clear that we do not discriminate, and we should support those kind of policies that do not discriminate or give ways to discrimination. However, I believe there's some common sense aspects to the Voting Rights Amendment that we need to embrace, such as I think voter ID is a common sense approach to voter identification. I believe that the having a way to verify and citizens who register, I think birth registration identification is necessary to verify who's voting and who's registering.
All right, thank you. We have a challenge from Ms. Adams.
Just to comment, you know, we have had a process in place for hundreds of years that have worked. There's been some speculation that there's been voter fraud. But we have no evidence of that. Voter ID stipulations are really designed to keep people and discourage people from going to vote. We have to also realize that so many people do not have an ID. You have a lot of elderly folks who you'd have to get your birth certificate. Many people's birth certificates are not even registered. So that's just I think a ploy to keep citizens from voting.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. We have a challenge from Mr. Threatt.
Well, I think during our primary race, we had Gardenia Henley from Winston-Salem, who submitted a report to both parties, the Republican and Democratic Party, documenting widespread voter fraud there in the Winston-Salem area. From that, we end up getting some information and this case on requiring voter ID. And I think that's common sense stuff. We have to have IDs for almost everything. And we can find ways to ensure that those elderly or those ones who do not have an ID can actually get their ID and make it affordable.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, in order to prevent gerrymandering by political parties, would you support an independent commission to determine congressional and legislative districts? Why or why not? We're looking for a 30-second response. Mr. Threatt.
Yes, I would support an independent panel to make that decision. I think that's the kind of transparency that the congressional races need. We have gone through this a number of times. These districts have been redrawn and redrawn. It appears to be a lot of intent by perhaps both parties to try to make the districts more favorable to them. But we need transparency, we need the openness, and we need an independent perhaps group to help draw those districts. So yes, I'm in favor of that.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I've always supported an independent commission to do that, to redraw district lines. I don't believe that politicians should be involved. I think we get oftentimes more concerned about our own districts and so forth. And I think to make the process fair, not only for the people who are running for office, but more specifically so that you have fairness in the overall process for the people who are going to be represented. So I would certainly support a commission to do that.
Thank you. Our next question, there's a lot of talk in both parties about changing the Affordable Care Act. Where do you stand on this? Ms. Adams, a 30-second response.
The Affordable Care Act, I support it. I think it's been a great start. I applaud our president for doing that. I do think that there are some issues that we're concerned about. Some relate to small business and affordability for some folks. But I just believe, you know, if you have a crack in the wall, you don't tear the whole wall down. You go out and you repair it. And so I think that we have an opportunity, and I'm certainly open to working with stakeholders across this country to make sure that we make the Affordable Care Act the best health care system that we can have for all the people.
All right, thank you. Mr. Threatt?
I would support repealing the Affordable Health Care Act. First and foremost, it has been an absolute failure. We need a health care system and a health care insurance system that creates competitive intervention and competitive involvement from companies that can help reduce the cost of health care premiums as well as elevate the quality of care. You know, North Carolina has been one of the states that have suffered tremendously from the Affordable Health Care Act because it has forced all the other companies out of North Carolina except Blue Cross Blue Shield.
All right, and we have a challenge from Congressman Adams.
Thank you. As I said, I think it's been a good law, but I think most especially it has benefited a number of people, thousands of people right here in the 12th district who have never been able to see a doctor, who now have been able to do that. So I don't think we should overlook that. Many of those are families who have never had an opportunity to go to a doctor. So that's going to put a greater pressure in terms of support on our local economies, on our hospitals and so forth when people don't have health insurance. So I think we need to look at some of the positives as well.
All right, thank you. We have a challenge from Mr. Threatt.
Well, certainly there is and have been a tremendous need for health care, but you know the Affordable Health Care Act hasn't helped the poor. In fact, I talked to a young man not too long ago. He said he was denied health care because he couldn't afford the Affordable Health Care Act. And I thought the very intent for the Affordable Health Care Act was to make it affordable. But you still have to qualify. You still have to have funds to be able to do that. Medicaid was an arena where it was intended to take care of the poor and indigent. And so I think we had things in place. There was a need for corrections and some adjustments, but to implement the Affordable Health Care Act has been a total failure.
Thank you. Our next question, is privatization a realistic option for sustaining the Social Security program? Explain your position. You have 30 seconds, and we begin with Leon Threatt.
There may be some needs. Certainly, the present path that we're on for the Social Security agency in caring for our retired ones, it's bankrupt in essence. We have failed to sustain the kind of path and program that would take care of those who have placed and put so much confidence in Social Security. Some aspects of Social Security should be perhaps adjusted, privatized, or having a different kind of plan for young people that are starting work. So we need a correction in our path. The present path is not working.
Congresswoman Adams.
I believe if you work hard all of your life and you reach the age of retiring, that the funds should be available for you to do that. I mean, we owe that to our seniors and our citizens who've worked. I do not support privatization. I don't think that would help. I think that would create greater problems. It would cost more. But I also think we need to assist in trying to bring jobs back to our communities, so you have more people working and more people paying into the system. I mean, that's one of the things. But we do need to take a look at it in terms of making sure that it is sustainable for future citizens.
Thank you. Our next question, would you vote to reinstate the Glass-Steagall measures which prohibited commercial banks from engaging in the investment business? Why or why not? We're looking for a 30-second response. We go to Mr. Leon Threatt.
Some aspects of the Glass-Steagall Act is very helpful. It separates the investments of large banks and corporations from the private savings from the individual citizens. Some aspects of that very helpful, and it does provide protections for the average citizen. So yes, I support much of that.
Ms. Adams?
Well, I'm not sure that I would support bringing that back, but I do think we need to always make sure that our citizens are not taken advantage of, and we've seen a lot of that. Many people have lost housing. While we've had a recovery in some instances, a lot of people have not recovered. And so we are continuing to examine that, and we're continuing to look at it. There may be pieces there that we can revise and look at more thoroughly. But I think overall, whatever we do, we need to make sure that our citizens are not taken advantage of.
Thank you. And at this time, we will go to closing comments. We'll go to Ms. Alma Adams for your closing comment.
Well, let me just first of all thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity, and I want to thank all the citizens of Mecklenburg and Charlotte for allowing me to represent you in the United States Congress. You've had a good representative in Alma Adams. I have worked hard for Charlotte every day to bring resources back to our community for infrastructure, resources for transportation, for the Blue Line, for the Gold Line, resources for our airport, funding for our seniors and our veterans, for our schools and our universities. I'm going to continue to work hard to make sure that education is a priority and that we make sure that every citizen is provided for. I would appreciate your vote on November 8th for Alma Adams, absolutely the right voice for the 12th District.
Thank you. Mr. Threatt, your closing statement.
Well, I thank also the League of Women Voters for helping us to put this together. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to ask all of you a very serious question. How's it working here in the 12th for you? Are you better off in the last 2 years with the present representation? Has life been better? Job quality, job growth, has it been better? Have we increased? We need some changes in Washington. We need changes in leadership. We need fresh direction going forward where all of the good people of the 12th District are represented. I'm committed to represent all of the 12th, not just Republicans, but Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. I appreciate your vote. I thank you for standing with me here in the 12th District. Vote on November the 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one final question. Who do you support for President of the United States? And we go to Leon Threatt for your response first.
You know, this has been an interesting season, and I must say I have to stand with Mr. Donald Trump, and I think he's the best choice of the two.
Thank you. Yes or no answer from Ms. Adams, your candidate?
My candidate is Hillary Clinton. I will not support Donald Trump under no circumstances.
All right, and with that, we put a period at the end of this debate. Once again, thanks to Democrat Alma Adams and Republican Leon Threatt. They are again the candidates in the Congressional District 12 race. And again, thanks to both of you for taking part in our debate this afternoon. For more information about the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, you can go to www.goleaguego. A reminder for Charlotte-Mecklenburg County voters, early voting begins Thursday, October 20th, with 10 locations, and an additional 12 sites will open up on Thursday, October 27th. Early voting ends on Saturday, November 5th. And of course, the general election is Tuesday, November the 8th. Polls will be open that day from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. that evening. I'm Jeff Rivenbark from all of us at WTVI PBS Charlotte. Thanks for watching.